Hi there, it's Alan from Loud and Clear Glasgow, and we're currently at Linn Home, part of the Linn training and demonstration suite at the factory. And I'm delighted to be joined by Phil Budd, who's the head acoustic engineer within Linn.
There or thereabouts.
It's good stuff, good stuff. And we're here really principally to talk about the Linn 360 Exakt loudspeaker, and more specifically the new Pistonic drive units. So without any further ado, Phil, can you give us a little bit of insight into really the design philosophy at Linn?
So yeah, in R&D, we've got a simple design ethos from our perspective. So it's really lose less, which is about the source. We're very much known for our sources. Lose any information at the beginning, you're never going to get it back. And obviously, our job is to faithfully reproduce recorded music. So if you lose less, the rest of the job is just add nothing. No distortion, no interference, no noise.
Yeah.
And that way all you're reproducing is that original signal. We don't want to add any of our own character, any of our own flavor. It's just about reproduction of that recorded signal. And that filters into everything that we do, and loudspeakers are no exception to that. So the 360, the glorious 360, our flagship loudspeaker, we introduced it about 3 years ago. And it embodies so many, or so much of that ethos. We strove really hard to drive down distortion with this loudspeaker. So this is an integrated Exakt loudspeaker for people who don't know Linn. All of the electronics really that you need is in the back of the loudspeaker. And Exakt is it's a bit of an umbrella term for a bunch of technologies, but really essentially it's a digital transfer mechanism and a digital set of filters inside that allow us to do a whole world of clever stuff.
So within a Linn system, you've got a source component, so you've got your turntable, and then usually you've got a streaming engine as well, which gives you access to music on a drive or Qobuz or whatever you're using as a streaming site. And then that's then connected, that sort of hub is connected to the speaker on a Cat 6 cable.
Essentially a Cat 5, Cat 6, just a network cable. So all of the information, we really like digital. It's a great way, I spoke about introducing noise, distortion and loss, or interference. Keeping stuff in the digital domain is the cleanest way of transferring information. When you look back at the old hi-fi chain of source, preamp, power, or even turntable, preamp, then your preamp, then your power amp, all you're doing is changing the level of the signal and passing it through cables. It's a bit bonkers if you look at it in that sense.
Lots of opportunity for distortion, lots of opportunity for information loss as you go along.
All you're doing is at every stage adding noise, really. So keeping things in the digital domain keeps it nice and clean. We do that to the very last minute. It's only at the last point that we convert to analog before it goes into.
So the digital to analog conversion is done all within the loudspeaker.
All of the crossover processing, and the volume control, and then the last thing is a D2A before you go into the actual amplifiers. Slightly disingenuous because driving the bottom end, we've actually got our power DAC, which is digital all the way through to the amplifier. But we try and preserve the signal as best as we can, and that's the original raison d'etre for Exakt. The massive benefit of Exakt is that we can produce a linear phase result. Now, linear phase is quite rare in the industry, but essentially it's about correcting the timing errors in a loudspeaker. So a conventional loudspeaker, analog loudspeaker, you've got a bunch of filters in there, and the drive units as well act as kind of mechanical filters. And you end up introducing these delays. Now you get very little delay at high frequency and quite a lot of delay at low frequency. So if you consider that from the point of view of a musical note, your harmonics are produced before the fundamental. Now, what that actually manifests as, if you convert time into space, which is what matters to human perception, is that essentially your high frequencies are somewhere in front of your low frequencies. They're set way back. So you've actually smeared a single note through space. So our ability to produce a linear phase result at the listening position means that all of that comes back into time. So every voice, every note that's played perfectly retains its position in the soundstage, which is immensely useful.
And that calculation is done within space optimization, which is a software that you guys do.
Yeah.
And that effectively does an acoustical map of the room and puts the loudspeakers in the situation in relation to you as in the listening position.
So yeah, the part that Exakt is using from space optimization is just really knowing the precise position of the loudspeaker in the listening position, so it can calculate exactly what needs done to get the thing there. The other huge benefit of space ops, obviously, is removing the low frequency nastiness from the room. So calming down room modes and also allowing a bit more flexibility on speaker placement. So you can put the speakers in a non-ideal position and we will optimize to give you a better performance in that position. So there's some key technologies that 360 was based on, which are really exact in space in terms of the kind of the fundamentals of it. But there are some other things that we looked at for reducing distortion as well when we launched 360. So at the back in the module, we've got 3 channels of adaptive bias control amplification. I'm not going to go into detail about that because I know you've got another video in far better and more appropriate detail than I could. We also have the power DAC down at the bottom with driving the bass. I've already mentioned that very briefly, but essentially that's about taking digital as far as possible. And there's some unique things about the way that the power DAC works, that it actually gets less, the noise drops further below the signal the louder you play, which is kind of funky really. Bass system, so it actually gets quite, it's cleaner. The harder you play it, the cleaner it gets. It's a lovely thing. So that was a great way in the electronics. 2 brand new technologies when we launched this that brought down distortion. And, again, add nothing. They're all about taking away that stuff that you don't want added to the signal. For the drive units themselves, I'm waving my hand near these. These are actually the new ones here, but for the drive units in there, the major step that we made really with 360 was moving from soft materials to hard materials. And that was driven by, we found a tweeter that we liked. We'd never liked hard tweeters. They always kind of sounded like someone tapping a Coke can. They just didn't really work for us. And we finally discovered a material that we really liked and a format that we really liked. And that allowed us to push everything to being hard. The benefit of a hard diaphragm is that, especially on a 4-way loudspeaker like this, you can push the diaphragm breakup resonance out. So soft materials, they kind of treat the resonance, they damp it a bit, and they make it pleasant enough to listen to. But you're managing that resonance. With a hard diaphragm, you can push the resonance out, and then you've not got the resonance there. It's not a problem. You've removed that source of noise. The other thing that we did with the 360 was really focus on dispersion technology. So that's why we have these glorious curves on the cabinet.
So that stops, minimizes edge reflection.
And that's one part of it. For me, it's about making the room disappear. And it's a weird one because you treat the loudspeaker to make the room go away. So normally when you're listening to a recording, there is space captured in the recording, but there's also the acoustics of your room because you're playing through a pair of loudspeakers in your room. And that's what makes you know you're listening to a pair of loudspeakers.
Rather than live music.
Or rather than what was captured by the mics in the recording. Let's put it that way. So with this dispersion control, essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that the sound in every direction has broadly the same frequency content. There's no strange peaks or dips in the frequency response going out to the side. Now it's really useful to know quite a lot about psychoacoustics as a loudspeaker designer, and that's a fair part of my background. But there's something called the precedence effect in psychoacoustics, so the human brain ear interaction. That basically says if you've got 2 identical sounds or very similar sounds with a delay between them, as long as the delay is shorter than about 40 milliseconds, you will only hear the first one. The second one just adds support. So you think about reflections in a room. Anything bouncing off the wall is going to arrive well within that 40 milliseconds. If you've got the same frequency response as what came direct from the loudspeaker, you won't perceive that reflection. So with space optimization dealing with the bottom end and removing that nastiness from what you're hearing, and dispersion making you no longer perceive reflections within the room, suddenly all you've got left is the soundstage in the recording. And especially when you combine that with Exakt, getting all the timing right and putting it in pins on
much more realistic.
Well, all of a sudden, we spoke when we launched these about audibly invisible, the speaker just disappears, and it genuinely does. It does a wonderful thing. You can stand anywhere in the room, the soundstage just remains intact.
That's one of the things we've really noticed in the den room. You can walk around the room and it's amazing. It can be right off axis. It's not very sweet spotty at all, which is great.
So again, for me, it's one of those wonderful things because it sits with our ethos. Previously, with our loudspeakers, we were adding the room to what you heard.
Yeah.
Add nothing. We've taken that room away by using space and by using diffraction. Careful design for diffraction within the loudspeaker.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the 360 in a
That's great.
nutshell.
No, that's really good. That's really good.